Welcome to the Not Old Better Show, the show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Welcome to a very special episode of the Not Old Better Show Inside Science interview series on radio and podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Seed and Qualia Senolytic. I'm Paul Vogelzang, and we're going to delve into a topic that touches our lives each day, yet remains shrouded in both mystery and opportunity: the power of the sun harnessed through rooftop solar panels. Joining us is Dr. Severin Borenstein, a preeminent voice on the economics of renewable energy and a visionary in the field of electricity pricing and policy. Dr. Borenstein, a distinguished professor at the University of California, Berkeley, go Bears, brings not only his expertise, but also a passion for a sustainable future that benefits us all. In this episode, we'll explore the significant implications of solar energy incentives offered through initiatives like the Federal Inflation Reduction Act and what these mean for you, our listeners. Dr. Borenstein will break down the complexities of net metering and why it has become such a contentious issue in the fight for fair energy distribution. We'll also take a journey through the evolving landscape of California's solar incentive policies so the rest of us can learn, and we'll glean some insights that could guide all of us in fostering our own sustainable futures. But this isn't just about policies and abstract economics. It's about the real world impact on individuals and communities. All of us in the Not Old Better Show audience, both young and old, are impacted by climate change. It's about understanding how adopting solar power can not only reduce our carbon footprint, but also reshape our economic landscape, making energy more affordable and accessible for everyone. Through Dr. Borenstein's expertise, we will unveil how these changes affect our wallets, our environment, and our future. So prepare to be enlightened, inspired, and equipped with the knowledge to make informed decisions about the energy that powers your home and life. We'll be talking climate change again soon with Meryl Davids Landau as part of our Prevention Magazine interview series, so stay tuned. But today's episode promises to be not only an enlightening conversation, but a call to action for all of us to contribute to a more equitable and sustainable world. Dr. Severin Borenstein, welcome to the program.
Nice to be with you.
It's so great to be with you today, too. I'm excited to get into rooftop solar. Congratulations on all your work. I got to tell you, I'm a former Northern Californian. Both my parents went to UC Berkeley. I know we're talking to you today in the Northern California area. My dad then went to UCSF, so go Bears. Great. Well, let's just jump right in, Dr. Borenstein. Could you start by explaining the economics of rooftop solar panels? I think it's going to be good for us to get that sense as to what this really represents in terms of its financial impact. Tell us perhaps the impact on greenhouse gases and the potential impact in defeating some of this really stark reality that we're facing with climate change.
Well, it varies a lot around the country because it depends so much on the system that is around the household that's putting in rooftop solar. But you need to think of it from two different perspectives. There's the homeowner's side and there's the system side. The homeowner's calculation is pretty straightforward. You look at whatever the policy is, how are you going to be compensated for the power that that rooftop system generates? And we can talk about the different ways of compensating people and compare it to the cost. The cost is very substantial, so it's often a stretch for people, even if in the long run it would save money. From the system side, you need to think hard about, okay, how much is the system actually saving when a homeowner puts in rooftop solar, and how does that compare to their compensation? So, for instance, in California, until last year, I had a program called net metering, which is the standard approach, which is that a homeowner gets to net out all of their rooftop solar production from their retail consumption. And so if you were consuming 500 kilowatt hours a month and your system produced 300 kilowatt hours a month, then you would only have to pay for 200, regardless of whether those kilowatts from your rooftop actually went into your house or went into the grid. That works if that retail price you're saving reflects the actual cost savings to the system, so that when you save 15 cents a kilowatt hour, the system also saves 15 cents a kilowatt hour, and it's reflecting the true savings. In California, we've gotten way out of whack. So retail prices in California, in my area, the largest utility, Pacific Gas and Electric, are over 40 cents a kilowatt hour. But the savings from household that installs rooftop solar for the system is about 10 cents a kilowatt hour. That difference, the 40 cents to 10 cents, is covering all sorts of fixed costs in the system. These days, it's being driven up very rapidly by the things we have to do to respond to climate change. So we have huge wildfire problems. We're paying for the damages from past wildfires, and we're also putting in new technologies to prevent future wildfires. When one household puts in solar and saves 40 cents a kilowatt hour, if the system only saves 10 cents, then that 30-cent difference has to be paid by all the other ratepayers. And that cost shift is a significant part of the reason that rates in California have really skyrocketed. My calculation is of the increase in the last few years, 30% has been due to this increased cost shift as a result of huge increases in rooftop solar installation in 2020, 21, 22, 23.
I think it'll be really helpful for our audience to hear you explain a little bit about what net metering is, and maybe give us some context, because in my research in anticipation of our conversation today, Dr. Borenstein, I learned that net metering potentially offers some financial adverse impacts to specific socioeconomic communities.
Yeah, so there are real equity implications. First of all, they're just general equity implications when people make some investment in order to save money, but most of the savings is just shifting costs onto other people. But it's particularly problematic in this case because the cost shift is disproportionately onto low-income people. And that's because if you look at who's installing solar, it's wealthier households. Renters would have a very hard time going solar. And low-income people, because of the high cost, have a very hard time going solar. And so we have seen a huge increase in residential solar in California. Right now, about 20% of all the electricity households consume is coming off of rooftops. So it's become a very significant share.
Yeah.
It is disproportionately wealthy people. Now, the industry will say, well, that's not as true as it used to be. And that's true. It used to be even more disproportionate. But the gap from the latest study from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, the gap between households putting in solar and the average household is about $70,000 a year in income. So we're still seeing a very large gap. Low and middle income households are putting in more because we have a policy of subsidizing that particularly. I don't think that's a good policy because I think it's helping a few low income customers while loading costs onto all the other low income customers. I've referred to it as rooftop solar Hunger Games. And I think that that money would be better spent lowering the cost for all low-income customers. And we've actually just passed a new billing policy that I think will help do that. But so the problem with net metering and this cost shift is not just that there is just a general fairness issue, it's that it is particularly lowering costs more for wealthier people and increasing costs more for poorer people.
Hi, it's Paul. We'll be right back with Dr. Severin Borenstein to talk about the science behind climate change. But I want to tell you about our sponsor today, Seed, and how small actions can have a big impact, just like a smile or waking up a little bit earlier. Taking care of your gut with Seed's DS-01 Daily Symbiotic can transform your health. I've been using Seed's DS-01 and it's been fantastic. Just 2 capsules a day support my gut, skin, and heart health. My digestion has improved and I feel great knowing I'm taking care of my gut. When I miss a day, something's just off. Seed fits seamlessly into my routine. I take it first thing in the morning and the travel vial makes it easy to take on the go. No refrigeration needed. Super convenient for me. I chose Seed because of its rigorous scientific testing and natural ingredients. It's a product I trust completely. Your body is an ecosystem. We talk about that a lot here on the Not Old Better Show. And a healthy gut, absolutely key. Seed's patented capsule-in-capsule design ensures bacteria reach where they're needed without synthetic coatings. Seed's patented Capsule-in-capsule design ensures bacteria reach where they're needed without synthetic coatings. Consistency is crucial, and Seed's subscription service makes it effortless. The refill is always on its way, making it easy to maintain this healthy habit. So trust your gut with Seed's DS-01 Daily Symbiotic. Visit seed.com/NOB and use code 25NOB for 25% off your first month. All of this will be in our show notes today, so check it out again. That's seed.com/NOB, code 25NOB for 25% off your first month. Your gut will thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Dr. Borenstein, 20% seems like a big number. Are some of these attempts, these subsidies, are they really in actuality come hither rates, so to speak, to artificially boost the adoption of solar rooftop panels?
Well, they are, but I think that it's misguided because I don't think that rooftop solar should play that big a role. And actually, a study by the rooftop solar industry says that as well. They hired Vibrant Clean Energy, a consulting firm, to do a study of what's the right amount of rooftop solar. And their national study said 5%. And their California study said 7%. Now, you can't compare that to the 20% because theirs was for the whole system, not just residential. But even if you look at California's whole system, we're already around 10%. We are really pushing past the optimal use. I would argue it's worse than that we're actually putting solar in the wrong places because there are places where rooftop solar can really be valuable. It's mostly rural and remote areas where the distribution lines are particularly costly to maintain and dangerous for starting wildfires. So we are seeing a new program in California that will subsidize microgrids at the end of long distribution lines in rural areas, particularly areas that are very wildfire prone. That is a great use of distributed solar because what they're doing is they're saying, we are going to give you panels, we are going to give you batteries, and then at the worst wildfire time of the season, the fall, when the winds are up and it's a bad day, we're going to cut off that line so it doesn't start a fire. Now, they're already doing that, by the way. You may have heard we have these public safety power shutoffs in California where they shut off power to people without giving them any way to get through it. They aren't doing very much of it anymore. There are a few very bad years where even people like me in the suburbs got it. Now it's mostly in the rural areas. And we have a program, and I think this is a great program to really target those areas for distributed microgrids where we can really, by doing that, use the solar to its maximum value.
Dr. Borenstein, in my research and preparation for our conversation today, I came across some research and writing of your own about the use of solar and in particular solar rooftop panels in the farming community. And I wonder, is that the micro groups that you're referring to?
The farmland is where do you put the big solar farms?
Massive.
Yeah, the massive ones, 500 megawatts. That doesn't mean much to your listeners. Enough to serve thousands and thousands of homes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And what's happening is you probably heard another thing climate change is doing to the state is we're getting less rainfall. And as we have less water, a lot of farmland is being fallowed. This is ideal for solar because it's mostly in the Central Valley, very high solar radiation. So you can generate a lot of power. It has a really pretty light footprint. If 30 years from now you want to take these panels out, it really isn't that big a deal, but it's a great use of that land if you're going to fallow the land. Now, we get in a lot of fights about putting in solar in pristine desert land, and we should be looking closely at those. But there is a lot of farmland that is just not going to be used much because there's no water to grow things. And if we do that, I think we can really grow the grid scale. And if you look at the cost of grid scale solar compared to the cost of a rooftop solar, grid scale solar is probably these days about a third the cost. It is really massively cheaper. And that's even counting in, yes, there are disadvantages. You got to build transmission lines. Transmission is in California is 40 cents a kilowatt hour we're paying in my area right now. Transmission makes up a few cents of it. It's really just not a big piece of the puzzle.
Hi, I just have one more quick message for you before we get back to our interview with Dr. Severin Borenstein about rooftop solar panels. But I have a quick question for you. Have you heard about senolytics yet? It's a class of ingredients discovered less than 10 years ago, and they're being called the biggest discovery of our time for promoting healthy aging and enhancing our physical prime. Your life goals in your career and beyond require productivity. But let's be honest, the aging process is not our friend when it comes to endless energy and productivity. That's why I use Qualia Senolytic. If you want to age better, you have to try Qualia Senolytic. It helps your body eliminate senescent cells. I felt years younger within just a month or two. Wow. As we age, everyone accumulates senescent cells in their body. These senescent cells cause symptoms of aging, such as aches and discomfort, slow workout recoveries, and sluggish mental and physical energy associated with that quote unquote middle age feeling. They're also known as zombie cells. I love that. They're old and worn out. They're not serving a useful function for our health anymore, but they're taking up space and nutrients from our healthy cells. Much like pruning the yellowing and dead leaves off a plant, Qualia Senolytic removes those worn out senescent cells, those zombie cells, to allow the rest of the cells to thrive in the body. Personally, I found I had more energy. I felt years younger over the last couple of months, and I'm even more enthusiastic. All of you know that I have a ton of enthusiasm, but after 2 months of Qualia Senolytic, I have even more. It's fantastic. It's clinically tested. So this 2-day rejuvenation regimen may hold the key to unlocking cellular health and revitalizing aging tissues throughout the body. New research on aging and longevity, including a clinical study on Qualia Senolytic, which we'll link to, shows that senolytic supplementation can play a huge role in enhancing how we age. So resist aging at the cellular level. For better aging, our dear Not Old Better show audience, try Qualia Senolytic. Go to qualialife.com/NOB. All of this will be in our show notes for up to 50% off, and use the code NOB at checkout. Let them know that you listen to the show. You will get an extra 15% off. That's qualialife.com/NOB for an extra 15% off of your purchase. Thanks to Qualia for sponsoring today's episode.
What's the role that rooftop solar panels can play in mitigating climate change in light of some of these alternative fuel sources? Because we are just seeing such amazing impact from fossil fuel and its impact on the planet. How do we mitigate some of this today?
So this is so locationally varying. So California is very solar. We're getting a much larger share from solar than wind. That's going to continue to be the case, possibly changing if we build a lot of offshore wind. The potential for offshore wind is very exciting because if you put it offshore, you can get really steady generation, which is one of the big problems, of course, with wind and solar is when they aren't reliable. But if offshore, they're much more reliable. If you go to the upper Midwest, you're not going to generate much solar there, but you can generate huge amounts of wind. The Republican Iowa senators are huge supporters of subsidies for wind power. If you go further south, in particularly the Oklahoma, northern Texas areas, those are gigantic wind areas, but they're also pretty good solar areas. So I think that it really varies regionally. Unfortunately, the Northeast is not great at either. And that's part of why we need long distance transmission lines. I think that we're going to see a wide variation. I don't think rooftop solar has a big role to play in any of these areas. I think it has a niche role and an important niche role in some areas. There are some people who have the fantasy that they're going off the grid when they put in rooftop solar. You go off the grid when you cut the wire. Yeah. The fact that you're generating power even as much as you consume does not put you off the grid. That just makes you another generator on the grid. So if we're going to cost effectively decarbonize the grid, and that's how you do it equitably, we're going to really need to think of how all these pieces fit together. And there's more room for rooftop solar than there is than we already have in most of the country. But I think California has actually gone past the optimal amount, and we need to rethink the mix and rethink very much where we put that rooftop solar to get the most value out of it.
Dr. Severin Borenstein, thanks again so much for talking to us today, for being so generous. I appreciate Skyline. I appreciate AAAS. Appreciate all that you're doing. Climate change certainly has a big impact on the young and the old, my audience in particular. But thank you, sir, for everything that you're doing. And We sure appreciate your time today.
Good to be with you.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Not Old Better Show.
My thanks to Dr. Severin Borenstein for joining us today. My thanks to our sponsors, Seed and Qualia Senolytic. Additional thanks to AAAS and Sciline for their help in arranging details of this episode. Please support our sponsors. Check them out. You'll find everything you need to know in our show notes today. My thanks always to executive producer Sam Henniger for all his work on the show. And my thanks to you, our wonderful audience here on radio and podcast. Please be well, be safe, and let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show on radio and podcast. This has been the Science Interview episode. So thanks, everybody. We will see you next week.